She found me by the hallway thermostat, where the house always sounds honest, ducks breathing, silverware clinking 2 rooms away, voices varnished by distance. Emily's party dress made a small storm of tulle around her knees, but her hands were still. 8 years old and suddenly older, she looked past my shoulder to be sure no one followed, then tugged my sleeve with a grip that didn't belong to cake and candles. "Grandpa," she whispered, and the word came out in pieces, like she'd practiced it and hated every rehearsal. "Tonight, after everyone leaves, Mommy and Daddy are going to take your money." The air thinned. Someone in the dining room laughed too loudly. I bent until our faces were level and could smell the frosting sugar on her breath, see the tiny freckle near her right eye Ellen used to call her compass. "Tell me exactly what you heard," I said, keeping my voice soft enough to float under the noise of the party. She glanced toward the kitchen where Mary's laughter rang like polished silver. "They were in the office last night. I was supposed to be asleep, but I wanted water. Mommy said you have too much money for an old man alone, and Dad said he didn't like it, and she said it would be legal because of the papers from the bank. She said it would be fixed tonight." Papers. Bank. The Tuesday Dorothy mentioned bloomed like a stamp in my mind. I felt the old engine of myself turn over, quiet, dependable, unshowy, and catch. "Did they say what the papers were?" Emily shook her head, eyes big and careful. "Dad kept asking, 'What if he finds out?' Mommy said you'd be tired and it would be done." I took her small, cold hands between mine and pretended to examine the bow on her wrist, so we still looked like a grandfather fixing a ribbon, not 2 conspirators rethreading a future. "You were very brave to tell me," I said. "Braver than most grown-ups. Now we have to do something even braver." Her chin trembled. "Will they be mad at me?" "They won't know," I said, certain in the way you get after 40 years of contracts and storms. "You and I are going to act like nothing is different. You're going to open your presents and eat too much cake, and when I say the word fireflies you're going to smile extra big so I know you're all right. Can you do that?" She nodded, a quick bird motion, then leaned in so close her hair tickled my cheek. "I don't want them to hurt you," she said. "You always listen." I swallowed the stone in my throat. "And I'm listening now. I promise you this, no one is taking anything from us tonight." The us surprised me, then fit. I pressed a kiss to her crown the way I did when she was a bundle, and Ellen was still here to laugh at my softness. From the dining room, Mary called, bright as a sail's pitch. Emily straightened, practiced a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and slipped her hand from mine. We walked back into the light together, the patient, grateful grandfather and the birthday girl, past the framed photos, past years that suddenly looked like evidence. At the doorway, she glanced up. I murmured, "Fireflies," and her smile flashed true. Good. The machine was running. Now it was time to check the bolts. I was 19, the first time a paycheck had my name on it, and not the name of the man who owned my hours. It wasn't much, $62.14 after taxes for 3 days hauling bricks on a site that smelled like wet cement and other men's ambition, but it was proof a boy from a trailer outside Dry Creek could lift himself into something measured. I kept the stub in my wallet until it bled into the leather. When the wallet wore out, I slid the paper into a coffee tin with the other relics that reminded me what broke feels like. There wasn't a plan, not at first. There was a back that could take a load and hands that learned fast. I stacked block, pushed wheelbarrows until the handles polished smooth, listened for the way a crew chief's voice changed when weather was about to betray him. Nights, I swept the union hall, traded labor for listening, picked up the language of bids and overruns, learned that money is just time that learned to sit still. My first tool I didn't borrow was a level bought used from a pawnbroker who called me "kid," like it was a warning. The second was a truck I paid for twice, once to own it and once in repairs. The third was a promise to myself that I would never let a man with a pen put me somewhere a shovel couldn't dig me out. I started taking small jobs nobody wanted, porch footings, crooked sidewalks, a storm-wrecked culvert that taught me what water remembers. I priced fair, showed up early, left sites cleaner than I found them. Word spread the way water does, quietly, everywhere. There wasn't a plan, not at first. There was a back that could take a load and hands that learned fast. I stacked block, pushed wheelbarrows until the handles polished smooth, listened for the way a crew chief's voice changed when weather was about to betray him. Nights, I swept the union hall, traded labor for listening, picked up the language of bids and overruns, learned that money is just time that learned to sit still. My first tool I didn't borrow was a level bought used from a pawnbroker who called me kid, like it was a warning. The second was a truck I paid for twice, once to own it and once in repairs. The third was a promise to myself that I would never let a man with a pen put me somewhere a shovel couldn't dig me out. I started taking small jobs nobody wanted, porch footings, crooked sidewalks, a storm-wrecked culvert that taught me what water remembers. I priced fair, showed up early, left sites cleaner than I found them. Word spread the way water does, quietly, everywhere. By 30, I had a crew and a name on the side of a truck that didn't embarrass me. By 40, I had an office with a door that closed and a banker who answered when I called. We built pads for warehouses, then the warehouses themselves, then the roads that taught trucks where to put their weight. I learned to read soil reports the way other men read scripture. I learned that a contract is a friendship with a clock in it. I learned to walk a site and tell, by the language of the mud and the angle of the rebar, whether a schedule was lying. I married Rose in a courthouse on a Tuesday because Tuesdays don't make a fuss. She ironed my shirts and my thinking, and when the numbers scared me, she reminded me that courage is just math you haven't done yet. We raised Harry in a house that didn't leak and taught him that tools go back where they came from. When Rose got sick, I counted pills the way I used to count loads of gravel. After she was gone, I counted days. People call it a fortune because they only ever see the pile. I see the years it took to stack it, change orders one paragraph at a time, winters that starved the calendar, summers that baked concrete into truth. I see the men who trusted me with their backs, and the clients who trusted me with their budgets. I see the kid from Dry Creek with a level and a rule he never broke: earn it, then guard it. Wealth, to me, is not a number. It's a shadow cast by work you did right when no one was watching. Instagram says they're flawless. Harry in a tailored jacket, Mary in a dress the color of new money, Emily centered between them like a proof of concept. The captions are generous with adjectives: blessed, thriving, grateful, and stingy with nouns that cost anything. Their house photographs well: white trim, rented tulips, a door that looks like it keeps secrets tastefully. From the sidewalk, you'd think I'd succeeded at the American Dreams group project. Up close, the paint chips. Mary learned early that compliments open doors other people unlock with keys. She thanks servers by their first names and then sends back the wine. She calls me Dad with perfect warmth, a vowel you could rest your head on, and in the next breath wonders, almost academically, whether a man living alone in a paid-off house might prefer community. She is polite the way a contract is, courteous right up to the clause that owns you. Harry practices ease. He wears it like a sport coat, shoulders a little too tight. He tells stories about opportunities that are always one phone call away, the kind you can't quite verify because they live in the cloud with other wishful things. When the stories wobble, he braces them with, for Emily, the way a bad bean gets shored with 2x4s and prayer. I recognize the look men get when they're drowning and choreographing a smile. I built a life pulling myself from that water. My son learned to float on other people's backs. The cracks didn't arrive like thunder. They zipped themselves into the seams of ordinary days. A temporary credit card you cover because the engine failed, then failed again. A school deposit needed today, before we lose the spot. Groceries, then braces, then a surprise fee whose surprise is mostly yours. Each request came wrapped in gratitude and stamped urgent. It is hard to say no to please help when the please uses your granddaughter's name. The house, bright for photographs, runs on a different electricity when no one is watching. Mary inventories rooms with a curator's eye. The granite in my kitchen dates the space. The art could fetch something at auction. She has a talent for turning nouns into verbs that move wealth from where it sits to where she stands. Harry's jokes about my truck. Finally getting a rest. Carry the weight of a trade in appraisal. At family dinners, their sentences align like trained geese. We've been thinking. From Mary. About the future. From Harry. For Emily. Together. It's a pretty harmony if you don't listen for the meter beneath it, the click of a calculator, the breath held for a signature. When the bill comes at a restaurant, Harry pats his pockets with theatrical confusion, Mary reaches for her card slowly, waiting for mine to land first. It always has. One night, after Emily fell asleep on my shoulder smelling like crayons and soap, Mary stood in my kitchen and admired the quiet. You know, she said, voice dipped in care, big houses can be so dangerous for older men. Stairs, bathtubs, all those little hazards. She touched the marble the way you touch a cat you're thinking of adopting. We should talk about options, while you're still sharp enough to decide. I smiled the old contractor's smile, the one that says I'll bid the job, but I've already measured your foundation. From the street, they are handsome promises. Inside, the load-bearing walls complain when you press them. I've spent a life listening for that sound. It's how you know where to shore, and where to tear out the rot before it spreads. It didn't arrive as a single crack, but as hairlines that only a man who's spent his life staring at concrete would notice. The first was a watch I never wore. My father's railroad Hamilton I kept in the top drawer for rainy thoughts. One Sunday it wasn't there. I emptied the drawer onto a towel like a surgeon, checked the underlip where things like to hide, even measured the gap at the back with a putty knife. Gone. Probably fell behind somewhere, Harry said, already shrugging toward the living room. Mary suggested a shadow box for sentimental clutter, so keepsakes wouldn't wander. I bought a small safe and told myself memory plays tricks. A month later, my property tax bill arrived with a late fee stapled like a scolding. In 50 years, I've never missed a due date. Autopay had been, helpfully, turned off through my online portal. Oh, Dad, that was me. Harry laughed. I was optimizing your accounts and must have clicked the wrong thing. He spoke the dialect of errors that never cost him anything. I reset the login and changed the password to something he wouldn't guess, then felt foolish for thinking I needed to. Mary started leaving brochures the way spring leaves dandelions. Active living communities, continuum of care, downsizing with dignity. Each pamphlet took up residence on my kitchen island between the pepper mill and the mail, all of them smiling at me with staged sunsets. Just information, she said, stroking the paper as if it were fur. I slid them into the drawer where misfit utensils go and closed it gently so the pamphlets wouldn't complain. A small drift of mail never arrived. The utility turned up at my door to verify my forwarding address. I hadn't moved. My mailbox had. Clerical mix-up, Mary said quickly, intercepting the conversation. We were updating things for you. I stood there, a man with his name on the house, listening to a stranger explain where my bills had been sent. Numbers told more truth than people. A charge on my card from a boutique Mary favored, the exact amount of address that later appeared on her in a photograph captioned #gifted. They must have saved your card on file from that dinner, she said, tilting her head into contrition. The bank reversed it. Harry apologized for the inconvenience, a word that fits like a tie around the neck of a wrong. In my office one evening, I found a stack of forms left on the printer, durable power of attorney templates, lines highlighted in patient yellow. Research. Mary smiled. Everyone should have their paperwork tidy before it's urgent. She'd printed 2 copies. Only one had my name half filled in. When Rose's coin purse, silver with a dent the size of our first winter, went missing from the hall table, I told myself I'd misplaced it. Weeks later, Emily pressed something cold into my palm in the backyard, eyes solemn. Mom said it's old junk, she whispered. The purse smelled faintly of her mother's perfume. I could feel the ridge where Rose's thumb had learned to push. Dad, we refinanced the SUV, Harry said cheerfully one afternoon, handing me a document to initial for the insurance. It was a title app transferring ownership for tax efficiency. The pen hovered over my name long enough for the room to notice. I set it down and made coffee instead. The paper found its way to my file cabinet without ink. Every incident, by itself, had an alibi you could almost believe. Together they made a map. Late fees that never used to happen. Help I hadn't requested showing up with a clipboard. Small valuables promoted from memory to myth. The language of concern applied where leverage was needed. I poured enough slabs to know when something underneath is settling wrong. You don't hear a shout. You hear a sigh, quiet and certain, as weight finds a new path. Thanksgiving puts on its best manners in this house. The table wears linen like a uniform. The silver stands at attention, and the turkey shines as if someone buffed it with ambition. Family photographs looked down from the walls, rehearsing their practiced smiles. I could have sketched the seating chart in my sleep. Harry beside me, Mary across, Emily between them like proof of a promise, neighbors orbiting at polite distances. The room smelled of sage and citrus and something else I couldn't name, like varnish over damp wood. Small talk arrived on time and arranged itself in courses. The Johnsons admired the new backsplash Mary had helped design. Mary complimented their compliments. Harry told a story about a client pivoting and how he saved the quarter, a tale that changed length each time he told it. I contributed what was asked of me. The weather, a contractor's joke about cold joints in concrete, a story about Rose that made the candles lean toward listening. Emily swung her feet under the chair in a rhythm only I heard. When our eyes met, she gave me the smallest nod, a note tucked under a door. Mary floated, touching elbows, filling glasses the way you refill a narrative before it runs dry. Her laughter was calibrated and portable, the same volume at the table as in the kitchen, a brightness you could hang a plan on. When talk drifted toward finance, mortgages, the market, she redirected it to charity drives and holiday schedules. "We've been thinking about simplifying," she said lightly, and I nearly smiled at the verb. Harry checked his watch twice and pretended it was the oven. He carved with attention. He doesn't give invoices, narrating the bird as if it were a promotion. "Dad, make sure you try the dressing. Mary used that artisanal bread you like." He was generous with flavors and stingy with specifics. When the gravy boat reached him, he passed it right without looking, muscle memory for a different kind of handoff. The gratitude ritual unfurled, curated and camera-ready. The neighbors were thankful for health and new tires. Mary was thankful for community and the way family shows up. Harry was thankful for opportunities that align. Emily, when prompted, said she was thankful for fireflies in October, and I felt that word land in my chest like a key in a good lock. When it came to me, I thanked the table for showing up warm and on time. It sounded like nothing. It was not. Between courses, I wandered to the sideboard under the pretense of more wine, and caught my reflection in the window. A man with good posture and a face that had learned to listen. In the glass behind me, Mary slipped a manila folder onto the console with the care you give a newborn or a fuse. She placed a pen on top, parallel to the edge, then turned back to the laughter before anyone could call that motion what it was. We had pie because tradition requires sugar to seal the deal with memory. The cinnamon was loud. The room softened around its sweetness. Chairs creaked, napkins were folded into surrender. Guests stood in clusters by the door, rehearsing goodbyes. Mary's hand found my arm. "Don't rush off," she said, warmth on loan. "We wanted to chat, just us. Important family things. Won't take long." I nodded the way you nod at a foreman who swears the slab is level because his eye says so. Emily reached for my hand under the tablecloth and squeezed once. The pulse of a lighthouse, you only see if you know where to look. In the living room, the manila folder waited, patient as a trap and just as proud of its mechanism. The house exhaled as the last neighbor left. Doors clicked. The stagehands vanished. The script found its next page, and I folded my napkin as if I didn't already know every line. Later, when the house had emptied of applause and dishes, I asked Emily to tell me everything, and the story came out in the clean, exact details children use when no one has taught them to blur. I could see it as she spoke, the night before Thanksgiving, the hallway at her height. She woke thirsty. The nightlight in the bathroom made a small yellow island on the floor, and the cold tile startled her feet awake. On the way back to bed, she heard her mother's laugh, soft, practiced, the one reserved for strangers and plans. The office door was mostly closed, the kind of gap adults think is privacy, and children know is an invitation. She stood where the wood molding met the carpet, one hand on the wall the way you steady yourself on a boat. Papers lived on the desk like sleeping birds. Emily knows papers. School sends them home with stars in the corner. These had tabs the color of warning and words she could sound out if she took her time. Power, attorney, guardian. Her father's voice came in starts, the way his voice sounds when he backs the car too close to a mailbox. "Mary, I don't. Are we sure? We're protecting him," Mary answered, and that word, in her mouth, wore a skirt made of steel. "He's confused lately. Tuesday's meeting confirmed it. It will be legal. The bank said the court can expedite if there's risk. Emily's breath made a cloud she was certain the door could see. She counted to 8 the way I taught her on the lake when the bobber disappears and you're learning patience. Her father said, "What if he finds out?" And Mary, steady as a countertop, said, "He won't. Tomorrow he'll be tired. We'll have witnesses. He'll sign. After that, the accounts move. No more chaos. It's for Emily." Her name landed in the room with a thud she felt in her knees. Her father tried the word love, and it sounded like a tool he hadn't used in a while. "I love my dad." Mary let silence do half the work, then filled the rest. "Loving him means managing him. He's an old man alone with too much to handle. We fix it before he breaks something." A page turned. A pen clicked. The printer hummed out 2 more sheets, the machine's patient confidence as loud as a promise. "Doctor's note?" Harry asked, smaller now. "Scheduled," Mary said. "Confusion, headaches, forgetfulness. We'll have records by Monday. If he balks, the emergency petition goes in." Emily stepped back because the carpet had suddenly become a slope. On the way to her room, she passed the family photos and saw herself in the glass. Birthday girl, gap-toothed, a ribbon in her hair, and thought of the way I let her stir batter until the spoon made a galaxy. In her bed, she counted to 8 again, and whispered the only plan she could make: tell Grandpa. Tell him like you tell the truth when you've knocked over the milk and no one has yelled yet. In the morning, she practiced being ordinary. It is hard work. Later, by the thermostat, she handed me the night entire, one careful sentence at a time. I held it the way you hold a blueprint that shows where the rot really is. The house had gone to bed, but not to sleep. Pipes clicked like old knuckles, the refrigerator exhaled, and somewhere a clock argued with itself about the hour. I was in the study with a green-shaded lamp on low, the kind of light that only invites honest things to the surface. Rose's picture watched from the bookshelf, her smile doing what it always did, steady the room. I was not reading. I was waiting without admitting it. The door eased open, the way a careful breath does. Emily slipped inside in sock feet, hair unbrushed from pillow tides, clutching the hem of her robe in 2 tight fists. She closed the door the last inch with the gentleness of someone who has learned doors can betray you. When she turned, I saw the tremble she'd been holding still for the hallway. "Fireflies," I said, our foolish password, and only then did she let the fear show. She climbed into the leather chair beside mine and folded herself small, knees under her robe, toes like commas. "Grandpa," she whispered, and the word had to navigate a storm to reach me. "They're doing it tonight." I didn't say which thing. "Tell me slow," I said, and reached for her hand. It was cold, the way hands get when Brave has been working too hard. "They said after the party, after everyone leaves." She took a breath that scraped. "Mom put the papers in the yellow folder, the one with the shiny corners. Dad said he didn't like it, and she said it's legal and we'll have a notary tomorrow if he tries to change his mind. She said you'd be tired. She said the bank showed her the forms, and the doctor will say you're confused." The last word arrived like she'd bitten it. "Did you see the papers?" She nodded. "Power of something. Attorney. And another with temporary and emergency on top. She practiced where you sign." Emily's eyes flicked to the desk as if the papers might grow there like mushrooms. "She said they'll move your money so it's safe. She said safe means where she can see it." I felt the old contractor settle into me, that quiet the body keeps for when a slab needs to be poured right the first time. "Who else knows?" I asked. "No one. I heard them again just now. Dad asked what if he won't, and she said he will. He is tired of fighting." Emily swallowed. "Are you tired of fighting?" "Not tonight," I said, and the truth of it warmed my chest. "Not for us." She leaned into me until her head found the familiar groove below my collarbone. I smoothed her hair and felt the fine electric fear in it, the way a cat's fur lifts before lightning. "I don't want to be in trouble for telling," she said. "I don't want you to be in trouble for not signing." "You are never in trouble for telling the truth," I said, and watched Rose's picture nod, because that's the kind of magic memory will do for you if you let it. "And I won't be in trouble. I know the rules of this game better than they do." "What do? "We act like we always do," I said. "You sleep. I work." I walked her back to the door, and knelt so we were eye level. "If anyone asks, you were dreaming about the lake and came to tell me the fish were jumping." She almost smiled. "They were." "Good," I said. "Then we'll catch them in the morning." When she'd gone, the room felt larger, and the lamp's circle of light looked less like a halo and more like a plan. I opened the safe, laid out the documents that remembered who I am, and set a blank yellow pad beside them. The pen felt heavy in my hand in the way decent tools do. Midnight had confessed what it needed to. The rest of the night belonged to work. The key turned the way it always has. Quarter twist, slight resistance from the old brass pins, a click that sounds like a door remembering its manners. The cabinet didn't. Something in the hinge gave a whisper I'd never heard, a dry scrape like a nail on primer. I stood a second with my hand on the pull, listening the way you listen to a wall you're about to open. Then I swung it wide. Inside, the order I trust so I don't have to think was a half-inch off everywhere. Folders that lived flush had drifted forward, as if someone with a different kind of respect had put them back. Dust tells the truth. A clean line where the Hale Trust binder should have shaded the shelf, now blurred into a thumbprint of absence and return. I don't keep hair traps, I keep habits. Habits said this was wrong. I pulled a Hale Trust first. I always staple at a southeast angle. These pages wore their metal due west. The notary seal on the original will is a raised sun under your fingers. My fingers found a flat photocopy wearing the same smile. The original was there, but someone had slid copies between sections, like new leaves in an old book, and the pagination stuttered. 12, 13, 15, 14. Sloppy, if you're counting, invisible, if you aren't. The deed folder smelled faintly of warm plastic, the breath of a cheap scanner. Corner protectors I'd put on straight now showed a shy flare where they'd been peeled back and pressed again. My account list, the one written by hand in Rose's kitchen on an evening when numbers comforted us, had a new crease it hadn't earned and an oily smudge over the routing numbers in a fingertips oval. I don't carry oil on my hands when I work paper. Harry does. Mary wears hand cream that smells like grapefruit. The cabinet smelled like both and toner. Insurance beneficiaries, intact. Bank signature cards, moved to the front as if someone wanted the path without walking the distance. In the First National folder, a photocopy of my driver's license I'd never made sat on top, margins trimmed too neat, the way clerks do when they're building a file for someone else's comfort. Behind it, a fresh printout, conservatorship, expedited procedures. Highlighted. My highlighter lives at my desk, uncapped and crusted. This line wore a clean stripe. I set each folder on the desk, squared the edges, and counted like a man taking inventory after a storm. Originals, duplicates, gaps. The record of 247 temporary helps to Harry and Mary was present, now with a paperclip in a spot I had no use for. Whoever came in here didn't know the language of my order, they only knew their need. The lock plate showed the smallest scratch where the finish used to be whole. Not pride keyed. I keep one key on me, and one in the kitchen drawer under the rubber bands. The drawer looked innocently ransacked the way a stage looks like a living room. I put everything back my way, then didn't. The originals went into a plain envelope I slid into the safe behind Rose's photo, combination turning under my hand with the comfort of muscle memory and marriage. In their place I built a decoy, copies out of order, a signature here that says nothing there, a trail that leads to the wrong door. The cabinet closed better this time, as if it approved of the adjustment. I turned off the lamp and stood in the dark long enough to feel the room settle around my decision. Tomorrow, James at 10. Catherine with her seal and steady eyes. Let them bring their yellow folder. I have my own. Morning arrived with the kind of polite gray that makes a man believe he can still steer the day. I made coffee the way I always do, 2 scoops, slow pour, the old kettle whistling like a friend who prefers understatement. I fed the dog we don't have any more out of habit, set 2 mugs on the counter because Rose once liked the ritual, and let the house watch me be ordinary. Calm is a tool if you hold it by the right end. I moved like a man with nowhere to be, and used the time like a crowbar. The laptop woke, the bank portal recognized a face it has known longer than my barber has. I didn't empty anything. Thieves notice emptiness. I thinned. Operating cash to a new account at the credit union across town opened last month for rate shopping, a phrase clerks understand and predators ignore. The brokerage stayed where it was, but I changed the permissions so any movement requires a voice print and Catherine's stamp. The trust account split, one portion into a custodial structure with a lock labeled Emily, the kind of lock courts like and opportunists avoid. Between transfers, I watered the fern in the dining room. It doesn't need much, and neither did these moves, 0.5% shifts, fractions of a map. I called James Miller and talked about football for 2 minutes before I asked about portfolio simplification. His voice did the banker slide from friendly to precise. "Come in," he said, "or I can stop by." "Stop by," I said, casual as weather. 10 works. My lawyer's number still lives on a paper Rolodex because I trust ink more than apps. Catherine picked up on the second ring, the way she always has for 20 years. I told her I wanted to refresh documents for tax season, which is the legal profession's version of small talk. "Bring the old ones," she said. "We'll keep what serves you and drown the rest." I like the verb. We set a time that rhymes with alibi. I left the safe as I'd arranged it last night. Originals sleeping under Rose's photo, decoys in the cabinet wearing the wrong shoes. I added a hair-thin strip of tape inside the hinge. If it's opened, it will curl and tell me in silence. In the kitchen drawer, I put the spare key back exactly where Mary expects it, then shifted the rubber band ball 1/2 inch to the left. If she touched anything, I'd know by the crescent it leaves in dust. The phone rang with Harry's number. I let it count 3, answered on 4, let him pour concern into the receiver like cheap syrup. "Headache gone?" he asked. "Better," I said, and let a pause make me sound tired. "Good. We'll swing by after lunch, go over those papers." "Fine," I said. "I'll make tea." I could hear Mary in the background say, "Perfect." I walked the perimeter of the house the way I used to walk job sites when rain threatened. Gates latched, sensor light bulbs fresh, the office window lock seated with the confidence of a bolt that remembers its job. I set a small recorder under the living room console where the yellow folder had rested, not because I don't trust my memory, but because courts prefer playback to stories. When 10 came, James arrived with his portfolio and the expression of a man who knows where the rules live. Catherine followed with her seal and the patience of a person who has seen families try to turn love into paperwork. We drank coffee that had gone polite and reviewed a future written in ink. The house looked on, serene as a church. Somewhere in town, a printer was spitting out copies of my undoing. Here, I straightened the frame on Rose's photo and waited for the knock that would announce the performance. Calm, held properly, is a blade. I have 2 numbers I don't scroll for. My fingers know the path. Catherine answered on the second ring, the same clipped warmth she's used on judges and me for 25 years. I told her the version meant for phones. Documents in motion, a family meeting with a folder that thinks it's a verdict, the word conservatorship floating around my house, like a moth that wants the lamp more than the light. She didn't gasp. Good lawyers don't. She asked for nouns and dates. I gave her both. "Bring everything," she said. "Originals, copies, the mistakes they made while thinking they were being careful. And Thomas, don't sign a thing. If they insist on urgency, that's our leverage." I told her 10 was already spoken for. James would sit at my table to witness what money sounds like when it's walking toward a different pocket. "Fine," she said. "I'll come after. And I'll bring a template you'll like better than the one your son fetched from a search bar." When the line went quiet, I dialed a voice I hadn't needed in years. Sam Delaney still answers like a foreman at lunch, mouth full of yesterday, eyes on tomorrow. We built half this county shoulder to shoulder once upon a decade, then split the map friendly. He owes me a favor he never stopped repaying in small ways. A subcontractor I vouched for who didn't sink his job, a loan I didn't call when a winter went long. Today I asked for the kind of help that doesn't fit in invoices. Somewhere down the hill a car shifted into our street. I closed the safe with the gentleness of someone tucking in a child, and left the study door ajar the width of a bad idea. The house smelled like coffee and polish, and the last quiet seconds before a plan meets human nature. The house keeps a different kind of quiet after midnight, the kind that lets you hear a thought change its mind. I left the study door open the width of a poor decision, and sat in the dark at the kitchen table with the lamp off, a cup cooling in my hands, and the tablet face down beside it. The recorder under the console was already listening. The hallway camera wore its eye like a button in the wainscot. The clock made its soft argument with time. At 1:43 the garage sighed. Tires whispered the last 2 feet into the bay. Voices came in on tiptoe. Mary's varnished hush. Harry's gravel trying to be water. They paused at the mudroom like swimmers measuring temperature with toes. Then the familiar choreography began. Mary opened the junk drawer and arranged concern over her face, while her fingers did inventory beneath it. I couldn't see the key, but I heard it, the tiniest click of brass against porcelain when she lifted the rubber band ball to check the shadow I had left. A smudge would be there in the morning. Graphite telling the story skin pretends not to know. Harry stalled at the hall, pretending to study the family photos he never looks at in daylight. "Quick!" Mary breathed, the way you coax a frightened animal past a fence it keeps pretending isn't there. The hallway camera caught her hand flattening on the study door, then pausing at the hinge where the tape waited with a patience I admire in good materials and some saints. The tape curled under her touch, a small surrender that meant everything. They entered like tourists in a church. My desk lamp clicked on, low. The recorder under the console wrote down the shape of their breathing. Mary lifted the manila folder labeled passwords, as if she'd found a vein. Harry hovered, hands hovering too, the way a boy hovers before stealing from a purse he hopes loves him anyway. "Signatures," Mary said, spreading the decoy wool and sliding a pen across the wood. He practiced. "He's close." Harry's finger traced my faint pencil like a pilgrim over a relic. "The doctor's note goes on top," she added, stacking the counterfeit kindness where a referee might clap. She tugged at the safe again. The hinge whispered its second confession. "Take photos," she said. The screen glow lit her face from below, making her eyes into coins. Shutters chirped. On the camera, their heads bent together looked almost tender. "Account map," Harry read, relief washing through his voice like cheap whiskey. "Storage, good. We empty that first." They left fingerprints without knowing where. The graphite on the key will say so. The tape on the hinge has its curl. The time stamp on the hallway camera married their faces to the hour, like a justice of the peace with a long memory. When the lamp clicked off, I counted to 8 like I taught Emily by the lake. They moved past me in the dark on their way out, 2 ghosts that still cast shadows. The garage exhaled again. The house returned to its honest noises. I turned the tablet over and watched the footage once, just long enough to see the plan meet daylight without a sunrise. Evidence is a kind of morning. You don't rush it. You let it arrive, then you use it to see. I didn't ask them to sit. The study had already chosen where everyone belonged. I stood behind the desk with the lamp on low. They hovered in the doorway, Sunday's smile still wet. Mary went first with warmth that could cauterize. "Thomas, we thought we'd..." "Close the door," I said. Harry closed it. His hand shook. The house grew smaller around us, the way rooms do when they remember their purpose. I slid the tablet across the blotter and tapped play. The hallway appeared, grainy and honest. Mary's hand lifting the rubber band ball. The key. The hinge. The safe. Her face changed a degree, then learned stillness again. Harry stared, as if he'd never seen his own posture from the outside. "I want to hear you name what this is," I said. Mary found the word she practiced. "Concern." Then, when I didn't nod, "Protection." The video disagreed in silence. Harry swallowed. "Dad," we panicked. "You've seemed tired. We thought we should help before something." "You helped yourselves to my study at 1:43 a.m., I said. "You helped yourselves to my lock, my files, my trust. You practiced my signature." Mary's eyes flicked to the manila folder on the console, like a dog checking a buried bone. "We were only gathering information," she said. "For the notary. For your own good." I lifted the hinge tape, now curled with its small truth, and set it on the desk between us. Beside it, the key, gray with graphite where skin had admitted itself. Then the printouts, stills from the camera, Mary's fingers on my decoy will, Harry's phone pointed at my life. The air changed texture. "You went to the bank on Tuesday," I said. "Asked about emergency conservatorship. You printed forms. You wrote a script. You used my granddaughter's name as a reason." Mary's voice sharpened. "It is a reason. She deserves stability. She deserves adults, who don't steal with pens, I said. Harry broke. Dad, please, he said, and for a second he was 8 again, with pockets full of pilfered quarters and a story about a candy machine that owed him change. We were scared. The bills, the house, the school. The bills you run up. The house you stage. The school you use as a lever, I said. Fear doesn't make you a thief. Choice does. Mary's mask slid. The room met the person underneath. You are an old man with too much, she said, each word measured like a saw cut. You cling to it like it's virtue. We were putting structure around chaos. The court would agree. Maybe, I said. Courts like paperwork. They also like evidence. I tapped the tablet. Date, time, intent. You opened a lock that wasn't yours, reached for authority that isn't yours, and built a story to fit a theft. This is the opposite of care. Her mouth tightened. You set us up. I gave you a chance not to do the thing you came here to do, I said. You chose anyway. The knock at the front door traveled down the hall. Mary flinched. Harry looked lost. I didn't move. That will be James, I said, and Catherine. They're here to witness whatever truth shows up. If you have a version you prefer, you can try it now. Or you can sit in the quiet and feel what you did. For a breath, no one spoke. The doorbell rang again, polite as a gavel. Mary reached for Harry's sleeve. He didn't take the cue. The facade had no studs left to nail into. I watched it sag, then fail, and felt something inside me hold steady for the first time in years. Catherine came in like weather. No drama, all certainty, coat folded over her arm, briefcase already unlatched. James trailed her with a banker's calm and a folder thick enough to steady a wobbly table. I didn't introduce anyone. The room had names for each other now. We'll proceed in this order, Catherine said, setting forms on the blotter as if laying rebar. Revocation, amendment, trust restatement, directives. Her pen clicked once. Mr. Hale, do you affirm you are acting of your own free will and understand the nature and consequences of these documents? Her eyes held mine. She knew I did. I liked that she asked anyway. I do, I said. My voice surprised me with how little air it needed. She slid the first paper forward. Revocation of all prior powers of attorney, medical and financial. Effective on signature. Copies to all institutions by noon. James nodded. He'd already prepped the distribution list. I signed. My hand didn't shake. Catherine, steady as a plumb line, notarized, her journal capturing the hour. The old authority died as cleanly as a breaker flipped. Next, last will and testament, superseding all previous versions. The language was unemotional and kind. Assets to a testamentary trust for Emily's education and welfare. A modest bequest to the foundation Rose loved. A line for my son so small it could be mistaken for mercy, contingent upon a year of verifiable restitution and sobriety, documented work, and no further attempts to interfere. If unmet, it dissolved into the trust like sugar in hot tea. I initialed every page. Catherine watched, James witnessed. Catherine sealed. The living trust, Catherine said, placing the thick stack before me. Restated. Title changes filed today. Accounts moved under trustee control with dual authorization. You and the corporate co-trustee. No single signature can drain anything. James slid over transfer forms already half complete, his neat handwriting marching. I signed where the flags told me to. He countersigned, his bank baritone murmuring, effective on receipt. I'll courier originals. Catherine's mouth made a thin, satisfied line. Medical directive, she said. You choose your physicians. You choose your care. No third-party petitions without notice. I initialed the paragraphs that locked the door Mary thought she could walk through and felt the latch seat. Affidavits, James added, producing clean sheets. Attesting to tonight's events. The word tonight felt too small for the last 24 hours. I described the tape curl, the key's gray kiss, the timestamp's patience. Catherine notarized each statement, her seal landing like careful footfalls across a river. James penned his observation from Tuesday, inquiries about emergency conservatorship, timelines, evaluations. Facts behave well when they're fed in order. Catherine gathered the signed pages and tapped them into alignment. Last item, she said softer. Notice of revocation and no trespass letter. You can hand it to them, or I can. I took the envelope. Paper has weight. So does a boundary. Across the room, Harry stared at the pen as if it had teeth. Mary studied the door, as if it might learn to open a different way. I felt Rose behind my shoulder the way you feel a house shift onto its footings after a good pour. Catherine closed her case. Your estate is secure, she said. Your wishes are law again. Outside, a truck downshifted on the hill, and the sound was familiar and decent. Weight under control, descent managed, nothing rushing that shouldn't. She didn't cry when the papers were signed, or when Mary's voice went sharp enough to nick the room. Emily sat on the end of the hallway bench with her hands in her lap, like she was trying not to wrinkle the night. The house had learned to hold its breath. When Catherine and James left, and the front door found its manners again, the breath came back in a small, ragged sound that turned out to be hers. I found her by the thermostat, where the ductwork always tells the truth. She stared at the floor register as if warm air could explain adults. Fireflies, I said too lightly, and then wished I hadn't asked that small word to carry so much. Her chin jumped. They're gone, she whispered, and the way she said it made me think she meant more than summer. I sat on the step below her, so we made a crooked staircase of two. You were brave, I said. Braver than most men I've hired to pour in the rain. That's not what Mom calls it. She wiped her nose with the heel of her hand, embarrassed by the wet. She said I was a spy. The last word came out shaped like something she found on the bottom of her shoe. She's hurt, I said. Hurt people reach for names that make their pain smaller and someone else bigger. She said you tricked them. Emily's eyes shone the way water does when the wind changes. Dad looked. I've never seen his face do that. Being seen does that to people, I said. Sometimes it ruins us. Sometimes it fixes us. Sometimes both. She looked past me toward the study door, at the place where voices had been too loud for a house this old. Am I bad for telling? You are the opposite, I said, and made sure the certainty carried all the way across the register and into the vents. You told the truth because you love. That's the exact shape of good. She pulled her knees up, arms wrapped tight. I love them, she said, small and fierce. Even when Mom's voice gets that glass sound. Even when Dad forgets things on purpose. I know, I said. Loving someone doesn't require you to agree with their worst idea. Her tears came properly then, as if permission were the missing wrench. They were quiet tears, competent, the kind Rose used to cry at movies when the dog found his way home. I handed Emily a clean handkerchief, because paper falls apart when you need it most. She dabbed rather than wiped. Rose's granddaughter taught without lessons. What happens now? She asked, hiccuping once and hating herself for it. Now we make the house boring again, I said. We eat ordinary dinners and fix the squeaky hinge on the pantry. Your parents will have hard days and some good ones. They'll be angry, then sorry, then angry. They'll do work. You'll do school and a science project with too much glue. I'll be here. The river will keep going where it's going. She leaned until her shoulder found my arm, then stayed there like a decision. Will Mom hate me? She will not, I said, and put a kind of prayer in it. She might be loud. Loud is not forever. She nodded, exhausted by 8 years all at once. I stood and offered my hand. Come help me label the college folder we started, I said. We need to pick a brighter color. This one looks like broccoli. A smile found her face without asking permission. Blue, she said. The sky kind. 4 vets. We walked past the study without flinching. In the kitchen, the clock discovered its rhythm again. Emily wrote Emily's college, top secret in block letters that meant it. Her tears had left her eyes rimmed pink and tough. Loyalty hadn't moved out. It just learned a second room, the one where you keep the truth and check on it daily, like a plant that needs the right light to grow. Fallout doesn't explode in families like ours. It seeps. By Monday, the air around us had a taste, metallic as a penny held too long on the tongue. The first tremor came as a text from my sister June. No punctuation, all worry. Heard something about papers. You okay? I called her because some messages don't deserve to live in blue bubbles. She listened, said my name like a diagnosis, and told me she'd bring pie by even if I didn't eat it. That's how older sisters vote. Mary's side of the tree organized faster. Her sister Carla posted a square of beige wisdom about protecting elders even when they resist care, which is how you say conservatorship without staining your caption. Likes bloomed like mold after rain. By lunch, 2 of Mary's Pilates friends had commented hearts and the word brave, and one asked, politely, publicly, if I'd agreed to the plan. Harry didn't like any of it. He watched, the way men do when the water rises, and they can't admit they don't swim. At church, whispers moved and rose. Mrs. Whitaker squeezed my hand so hard it cracked my knuckles, whispering, "You stand firm, Thomas," as if I were a tent in weather. The usher's nod was longer than usual, the kind of respect a man gets when people learn he still knows his name. After the service, a deacon asked if I'd speak to the men's breakfast about estate planning. Sometime. I said maybe, which in our dialect means after the dust stops pretending it's fog. Harry's cousin Ben called to say he got both sides. He always has. He talked about stress, about how bills breed when you're not looking, about Emily's school as if tuition were a natural disaster. I let him talk until the steam went out of his sentence and then told him I wasn't a storm, I was a levee. He said he understood. Understanding is cheap. We'll see what he buys with it. The neighborhood decided in clusters. Dorothy across the street brought over a casserole, set it down like a witness statement, and said, "Saw the 2 of them at the bank again, heads down. I don't snoop, but my eyes work." The Johnsons waved more vigorously than usual and didn't come closer. The Martinezes knocked to ask if Emily could come over and paint with Tommy. She returned with blue under her nails and a smile that lasted 3 hours. Mary moved her campaign offline. She called June and asked for family mediation. She called Catherine and asked for clarity. She called me and didn't leave a message. When she and Harry arrived for a scheduled conversation, she wore contrition like a scarf, present, removable. Harry's tie was crooked in a way that made me miss the boy who used to run out of the house without checking mirrors. In the living room, they sat apart. That, more than words, told the truth of our table. "People are talking," Mary said delicately, as if gossip were a souffle we mustn't slam the door on. "This could hurt Emily." "People talk less when the facts are simple," I said. "They'll be simple if we keep them that way." June took my side. Ben said both again. Carla doubled down in beige. At the club where Mary organizes charity brunches, someone asked too brightly how my transition to assisted living was going. I said the house and I were negotiating. The house was winning. Laughter made a space for truth to sit in. That's all I wanted. At night, the texts quieted but didn't stop. A subcontractor I hadn't seen in years wrote, "Heard you poured one hell of a slab." Sam sent a photo of Parker, the off-duty deputy, notarizing his own bowling scorecard with a grin. James forwarded confirmations, transfers posted, titles recorded, the paperwork scanned tight enough to play guitar. In our kitchen, Emily did homework at the counter while I fixed the pantry hinge that had been complaining for weeks. Harry came by to return a wrench he hadn't borrowed, stood in the doorway, and said he was sorry without adjectives. He didn't ask for money. He asked if I'd teach him how to fix a hinge. We worked in silence broken only by useful questions. Mary texted 3 times that night, once about schedules, once about narrative, once about love. 2 were technical problems. 1 was a word that will require work to earn. This is what aftermath looks like when you don't let it become an ending. Lines redrawn in pencil you plan to ink later, pie you didn't ask for cooling on the counter, a granddaughter asleep on the couch with a paint smudge on her cheek, and a house learning to breathe at its own pace while the town decides what to do with its opinions. The river kept going where it was going. We stayed here and kept the lights honest. I wrote it at the kitchen table because that's where truth sits best in this house. Not on law firm paper, not embossed. Just a clean sheet, and the pen rose gave me the year the business stopped scaring us. The clock over the stove kept decent time. The furnace breathed. Outside, the river did what it always does, move forward without asking permission. "Emily," I began, because names deserve the front of a sentence. "By the time you read this, you'll be taller than the counter you can barely see over now. You'll have learned new words for old things. Keep some of mine. I grew up where money was a rumor, and luck was a weather report you didn't get. What I had were hands and a back and the decision to show up even when no one expected me. That's the first lesson. Show up. Not fancy. Not loud. On time, with the right tools, and a mind open to changing them when the job teaches you how. People will tell you trust is a feeling. In my experience, it's a schedule and a ledger. You build it like a road, layer by layer, compacted until it bears weight. You don't drive a semi over gravel and call it faith. Let people earn your trust by being where they said they'd be when the weather turns. Earn theirs the same way. Forgive missteps. Don't ignore cracks. You'll be told to chase happiness. I chased good work and found happiness trying to keep up. Work doesn't just mean a paycheck. It means the work of listening when the easy thing is to talk. The work of telling the truth when a pretty lie would get you through the door faster. The work of stopping when stopping is smarter than pushing. Quitting the wrong thing is not quitting. Money is a tool. It can build or pry. Don't let it tell you who you are. If it goes, you are still you. If it grows, keep your feet. Give some away in ways that make the world heavier in the right places. If you ever wonder where to put a dollar, put it somewhere it will teach someone else to stand. When people you love go crooked, hold the line and hold out your hand at the same time. That's a trick. You'll get it wrong. Get it wrong honestly. Love is not letting a lie sit at your table just because it showed up hungry. Love is keeping a seat open for the truth when it's ready to come home. You watched adults fail, and you told the truth anyway. That took a spine. Keep it. Soft doesn't mean weak. The strongest steel I ever poured had a little give. That's what kept it from cracking when winter found it. There's a folder with your name on it in the safe. It holds tuition and time and permission to change your mind more than once. Take the money. Take the lessons harder. Call me when the plan doesn't fit the ground you're standing on. Plans rarely do. When I go, I don't want you to inherit numbers. I want you to inherit the habit of checking the level and adjusting until the bubble sits where it belongs. If you do that, in your work, in your people, in yourself, you'll build a life that stands. I signed it the way I sign things that matter, slow and legible, so future eyes can hear me. Then I folded the paper, slid it into an envelope with a photo of us at the lake, the bobber between us like a tiny sun, and put it where important things wait without rusting. The house breathed. The river kept going. That's the last lesson, maybe. Keep going, but know what you're standing on. We ate at the kitchen table because a year taught us that's where food tastes honest. No linen, no centerpiece engineered for compliments. Just roast chicken that admitted it was a bird, mashed potatoes that didn't pretend to be clouds, and 2 tumblers of cider sweating small circles into the wood I've sanded a dozen times. Outside, the river kept its appointment with the bin the way it always does. The house breathed like a bellows between seasons. Emily set 2 plates the way I showed her last winter, forks to the left, knives behaving, and corrected her own mistake before I could. She's taller now. The counter doesn't look so smug. There's a smear of blue paint on one knuckle from whatever poster she made for biology. She noticed me noticing and tucked her hand away with a smile that said let an artist have her secrets. Fireflies, I said, testing the old wire between us. She rolled her eyes in the way 12 will when it gets here too early, then relented with a grin. Not in November, she said, but the current ran just fine. We said gray short a minute. I didn't list lessons. She didn't ask for any. We ate like people who aren't afraid of silence. After a while she told me the hinge we fixed together still doesn't squeak. Engineering, Grandpa. And that the college folder is now a binder, sky blue, with a tab labeled veterinary, probably. I told her probably is a good trail marker, as long as you remember it's not a map. About her parents, we spoke the way you talk near a sleeping animal. Harry comes by on Saturdays, with his sleeves rolled and his sentences careful. He's paid back more than I expected and less than he wants to, which is the right shape for penance. He brings over broken things, lamps, a fan, and we fix the easy ones and write lists for the hard. Mary keeps her distance, like a person learning to trust gravity again. I asked Emily about school. She told me about a lab where you can smell metal and promise at the same time, and about a teacher who listens even when he's grading. She's learning how to stand in rooms with doors she can open herself. That was the point of all this ink and ache. I said so. She pretended not to swallow tears, and then stole another spoon of potatoes to prove she wasn't the kind of girl who cries over compliments. When the dishes were rinsed and the oven had decided to cool, we bundled and walked to the river. The cold made our words come out white like truth finally visible. Duck stitched the water into lines. A tug far off moved something heavier than it looked. We stood without saying anything for a long minute, and then said the only thing worth saying. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" I asked, as if I didn't know. "For staying," she said, and slid her hand into my coat pocket where my hand already was. "Same," I said. The pocket made a small tin of warmth big enough for two. Back home, we cut a pie that tasted like cinnamon and forgiveness. I wrote the date on the calendar with the same pen I used on the papers last year, and drew a small circle around it so the page would remember. Before bed, I checked the safe out of habit, and then laughed at myself out loud. The folder with her name on it waited the way good things wait, quiet, unafraid. When the house settled and the furnace turned over, I sat a minute longer at the kitchen table, and listened to the river make its slow case for the future. Betrayal had its season. So does gratitude. The bubble on the level sat dead center. That felt like blessing enough.